heppinn að mér var gefin þessi bók áðan sem ég ætla að fá að þakka fyrir aftur og hún fer í stabban á náttborðinu en ég ætla að reyna að glugga í hana, ég lofa þér því en þú verður að spyrja mig næst þegar við hittumst. Takk fyrir og gangi ykkur vel hér í dag.
Kæra þakkir. Nei, út í tónum annars staðar. Já, kæra þakkir fyrir þín fínu orð, Guðmundur Ingi. Það er svona með ræðurnar, ef maður sleppir í þeim, þá getur maður stundum gleymt ýmsu. Ég gleymdi til dæmis að kynna mig. Hrannar heiti ég Arnarsson og formaður Norræna félagsins á Íslandi og tók við því árið 2019. Og það ár gerðist einnig sá góðu viðburður að Sabina Westerholm tók við sem framkvæmdastjóri Norræna hússins og það auðvitað verið mjög gott og gefandi að vinna með henni í þessu hjarta norrænnar samvinnu hér í Norræna húsinu, eina húsinu sem skilst að Norræna ráðherra nefndi nei og sýnir vel hvað norrænt samstarf getur gert mikið eða leggur sig fram eins og Norræna húsið hefur gert fyrir norrænt samstarf hér. Sabina ætlar að sjá hér næsta viðburð sem eru pallborðsumræður konur í stríði, hlutverk, menningar og lista á stríðstímum. Og eitt af því sem hún hefur gert hér í Norræna húsinu á sínum starftíma einmitt að opna húsið vel fyrir samfélagsumræðu, ekki síst eftir að stríðið braust út í Úkraínu. Það höfum við séð að tengingarnar við það og norræna samvinnu og norræn gildi hafa fengið hér mikið rými. Þannig að okkur hlakka til að hlusta á þær samræður. Sabina, gjörðu svo vel.
Tack Ranna. Glad Nordens dag och välkommen till Nordens hus också från min sida. Idag firar vi undertecknande av samarbetsöverenskommelsen mellan Danmark, Finland, Island, Norge och Sverige som undertecknades för exakt 51 år sedan, det så kallade Helsingforsavtalet. Kulturen har varit en viktig del av det nordiska samarbetet från allra första början och kulturen och kulturellt samarbete har sin egen paragraf i Helsingforsavtalet. Huset vi befinner oss i idag, Nordens hus i Reykjavík, grundades redan innan Helsingforsavtalets undertecknande och firar 55 år i år. Orsaken till grundande var tilliten till kulturens kraft att förena människor på en mellanmänsklig nivå och att bygga en bro mellan Norden och Island och det övriga Norden, en så kallad kulturbro. Den här verksamheten innebär i sig själv nordisk nytta. Men den nordiska nyttan i kulturarbetet kan ses på många olika sätt. Här hos oss har kulturen och konsten en central roll i arbetet med den tidigare nämnda nordiska statsministrarnas vision 2030. Kulturen kan ge oss innovativa lösningar, den kan förenkla och förtydliga och erbjuda oss perspektiv, vare sig det handlar om samhälleliga frågor, miljöfrågor eller krissituationer. I Nordens hus visar vi för tillfället utställningen How did I get to the bomb shelter med nya verk av 7 ukrainska konstnärer. Den här utställningen har finansierats via ett specialbidrag från Nordiska ministerrådet för produktion av ukrainsk konst och kultur, både här på Island men också i övriga Norden. För pengar som ursprungligen var budgeterade för arbete i Ryssland. Det här projektet har möjliggjort det för oss att med konstens medel ge perspektiv på den situation som ändrar ukrainarnas liv för alltid. I ett rätt litet land som är isolerat och på ett väldigt tryggt avstånd från kriget. Jag har bevittnat många starka känslor i utställningen och är glad över att den har väckt ett stort intresse. Den är öppen också ikväll, så att efter programmet här kan man gå ner till Kvällving och se den och träffa utställningens kurator Julia Sapiga. Hon kom till oss via programmet Artist at Risk redan i juni i fjol, och den här utställningen hade inte varit möjlig att producera utan hennes hjälp. Happy Nordic Day. Today we celebrate the Nordic cooperation. Culture has from the start had a central role in this cooperation. And the Nordic House is a good example of a platform and a meeting place for Nordic art, culture, and public debate that has been recognized and loved for already 55 years. This evening we have a focus on culture in times of war. Why is it important to speak about culture and art in midst of a raging war? Because of culture's capacity to bring us perspectives and insights, and its possibility to function as a metaphorical bomb shelter for people in need. But also because deliberate attacks on culture and art during war is something we have seen many times in history, and now lately in Ukraine, where UNESCO, as of 17th of March 2023, has verified damage to 247 cultural sites since 24th of February last year. To destroy art is to erase the history of a country, to deprive it of the quality of being a nation. Our exhibition, How Did I Get to the Bomb Shelter, with 7 Ukrainian contemporary artists, is open this evening, and you are very welcome after the program here to go down and see it and meet the curator, Julia Sapiga. Now we will move on to the next part of the program. I want to introduce to you Olga Jóhannesson. Olga is a documentarist and a producer of a media project called People to People, including a series of documentaries called Women in War. Women in War is a platform for women from Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, the Baltic, and the Nordic countries to tell their stories about how the war in Ukraine has affected them. Tonight, Olga will, together with 4 women of arts, explore the role of culture in time of war. The floor is yours.
Read poetry, look at art. If the war is still raging and people are still dying, the poems won't stop missiles, the theater won't stop suffering. But culture is not powerless. Through art, we establish similarities between past and future, between abstract and concrete. We learn to understand the difference between good and bad in the times of the utmost human struggles and calamities, such as the war in Ukraine. The culture and art play a crucial role in a time of war, providing means of expression, resilience, resistance, documenting of the reality, and not the least, healing of the souls. Why do we talk to women? Traditionally, war and everything connected with war has been intrinsically the male sphere. Boys play war, men go into battle, they fight, which leaves women and children with no right outside this narrative, which I think is extremely wrong. Women are not only affected by war, but they bear the hardest blow responsibility for the youth, for the children, for the elderly, let alone men themselves when they come from war. Women provide, women flee, women support, women give comfort and hope, not to mention that many of them actually do fight in the battle. Women have historically played a crucial role in shaping and preserving culture, especially in the time of conflict. They can offer unique perspective and insights into experiences of war, starting from the impact of war on families and communities, and into the ways in which trauma and loss are processed and expressed through art. The role of women and culture and arts in a time of war is essential and far-reaching, It encompasses both individual transformation as well as broader social change and preservation of cultural heritage. Welcome to the session, Women in War. Today we will hear personal stories. We live in a world awash with information. It takes 3 seconds to fish out the phone from the pocket, scroll down the headlines, and we think we know it all. And let's give it a doubt. Maybe we do. But right now, more than a year into the war, when actually the news of the horrors, calamities, and deaths are interchanged on TV and social media with the advertisements and Happy Ladies announcement, the weather forecasts, we get used to the war. And that's the danger that the human soul should withstand. We should never, ever get used to the war. Only through the eyes of the person, only through the voice of the human, only through the personal story, we learn to understand, to connect, and then it gets us. And then we can never forget. Today we will hear 4 personal stories, and let me introduce them. Valerie Ósk Elenudóttir. She is an Icelandic-Ukranian actress. She came to Iceland a long time ago as a teenager and has been living here since. From the first days of war, she's been very much involved in helping Ukraine from here, from Iceland. Natasha S, Icelandic poet of Russian origin. Natasha was born in Moscow. She came to Iceland 11 years ago. Educated as a journalist and being very politically active, she came to Iceland and started to write in Icelandic language to be awarded Thomas Guðmundsson's award for her debut book of poetry dedicated to the war in Ukraine, Mál taka í stríðstímanum, Finding Your Voice in the Time of War. Katarina Misečko. Katarina is a musician, violin player. She learned the news on the 24th of February while she was on tour with her orchestra in Europe. Spending the first weeks of war touring in the Northern Europe, collecting money for Ukraine and raising awareness of the war, she ended up in Iceland, where now she is a part of Iceland Symphony Orchestra. And Alona Szeptycka.
Complicated.
She is a Ukrainian artist, urbanist, and designer. She came to Iceland together with her husband, also an artist, and she strongly believes that it's in the power of art to change the world to the better, raise awareness, and help Ukraine. My name is Olga Jóhannesson. I will be moderating this panel. In the end of the panel, we would have a usual Q&A session, so you're welcome to think of the questions that you can ask our panelists. I promised you personal stories, and the first part of the talk will start with the personal questions. Valerie, can you tell us about how did you learn the news on the 24th of February, and can you describe your first weeks?
Okay, so 24th of February, it was morning when I woke up, because the evening before I was talking to my friends and my relatives in Ukraine, which we were afraid of, and of course we knew that something might happen, but nobody believed till the very end that it can happen. So my morning was, I'm just opening my phone, like right away when I woke up, because I was really hoping nothing would happen, but the text was the war started. It was very difficult to take, but I still believe, and because you're not there, you're in a peaceful country, Iceland, very safe, and everything is fine. And then this, and you just no, it's not true. So you start to call and start to text, and everybody, because you have many people you know there, and you start to think about everyone you know, and texting and trying to reach them, and it's true. And for the first 4 days, I was basically at home and couldn't do anything and just being on my phone all the time. And on the fourth day, I just realized that this is not helping no one, and you need to do something. You need to help, just how you can. And so by the time when you of course you start to send money, and because people in this situation, you start to help how you can. Like I really wanted to go myself to the border, not to Ukraine, but to the border to help. But I have a daughter, and it even came a time when she asked me, she was like, Mom, can I ask you something? I was like, oh yeah, ask me. And she just said like, can you please don't go on a war? I was like, why? Because I was like trying to protect her from this. But of course she saw that something is happening, I'm doing something, and she could hear talks on the phone, like try to, you cannot hide everything. And at that time she was 8 years old, so she's grown up, like in a way, so she can understand something is happening. Well, yeah, and I was like, of course, I told her I will not go. And then at that time I realized, yeah, I cannot go because I have my responsibilities here. And I wanted to do something more, and I was asking, what can we do? People in Ukraine, they just start to say like aid. We need like humanitarian aid. We need some food, clothes, like all that. And I spoke to people I know here, and we start to collect clothes. People start to bring us, and it was a lot of work. So we managed to send some of the help. And still, like we continue now, and we only can stop when this will be finished, over. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Natasha, you wrote a book dedicated to the war. That's a collection of poems. It's a very personal and very insightful collection of poems about the war. Now there is more than a year that the war is going on. If you were to write this book now, would it be a different book, or would it be the same book? And if different, how different?
I think definitely it would be different, because like when you write, especially poetry, I would say, or at least when I do, I feel like it's very hard to distinguish when the text is finished, and like if you just keep it like resting and go back to it, and it will change with time. So when I was writing it, it was like I was in a state of shock, and a lot of things was going on, and basically what I wrote there was things that were like deepest in me, I would say. And with time, of course, your emotions kind of transform, and you kind of like, you know, like get used to the situation, which is not really like, yeah, I don't know if you can get used to it, but to some extent, I guess. But like then I was like, it was a lot of like kind of panic, I would say, and like just like everything fell apart, and you like look in life how your like motherland is becoming into, not even becoming, but showing its real face, that it is a monster who will just destroy everything around it, and like outside and inside. And it's just was very strange. So there was like a lot of fear and frustration, and just being lost in the situation, not understanding how it could happen, not understanding how we didn't see it coming. And it sounds really stupid, because all Russian literature is about it, about oppression, depression, and like everything like political. And we're like, oh, we didn't know it's coming. And so that was the state when I was writing it. Right now I'm like maybe a little bit less emotional. I think I became kind of like emotionally numb within this year, because it's just, yeah, I guess there's like a limit of how much you can get. And I just like, okay, I'm full. So I think, I don't really know how would it be now. And to be honest, I don't really like to write about war, but at the same time, how can you not? How can you write about anything else when this is happening? So I'm a little bit like, feel like I'm stuck in this, yeah, situation and emotional numbness.
Yes. Alena, how has your experience of a refugee in Iceland affected your artistic career and the understanding of the role of culture, let's say in the time of war?
As a refugee, you know, I really, I try to avoid this situation to be a refugee. I prefer to be an expat because every nation is known by their famous people. And who those people? Scientists and creative minds. So first of all, it's a huge responsibility to represent nation, yes. And it's huge responsibility to bring something new to this world. So in one moment, everything that you built last years was destroyed. I understood that I need to start life again from zero. Ticket to Iceland was really one-way ticket, so I actually had a lot of choice, and it was absolutely something different to appear in other countries. So it wasn't my first country at all, so I was abroad before, I worked before in different countries, but just to appear in a role of refugee somewhere in the middle of the planet, it's frustrating, it's strange, and being an artist, you always use your emotions and your vision, and you use your feelings. And when all your feelings are brutally affected in one time, and when everything is destroyed and you need to collect all your powers and continue your way, continue work, continue create in one hand, and in other hand, often Icelanders ask me, why are you not crying? Why are you so active? So to tell the truth, I have my crying corner in home, but I do not want to affect people. I do not want to bring despair. I feel myself strong enough to bring inspiration. Artists bring inspiration. Artists bring changes to this planet, to this world, and I can do, and I can show how brave Ukrainians can be. And I can really build, I can really paint and act as much as I can to bring a better world to this planet, better situation. But yes, not despair, but inspiration.
Thank you so much for this answer. Katerina, can you tell us about the challenges that you have faced here in Iceland as a musician, as a refugee, or not as a refugee? And how could you overcome that? What motivates you and what inspires you?
First of all, I would like to change emphasis from the phrase war in Ukraine to Russian war in Ukraine or Russian invasion in Ukraine. I feel that it is very important because with this phrase Russian war in Ukraine, we emphasize that Russia is the initiator, the aggressor of the war, and Russia has the power to stop this war just to stopping committing crimes, committing attacks in Ukraine. And also with this phrase, we show that Ukraine is the victim in this war, and Ukrainians are defending our land. So I thought that it is important to say. As for my experience, I had one of the last flights from Kyiv on February 23rd, And I supposed to have normal concert tour in Italy with Ukrainian chamber orchestra. And we landed to Italy, in few hours later war started. So of course it was a big shock. And we started our concert the second day of war. I started giving interviews and playing concerts. Of course it was very difficult. I don't really remember that days. What I remember, I couldn't stay on my feet, to be honest, but we continued. I think we felt that it is our mission. At that time, we were the only Ukrainian orchestra abroad. So we were like Ukrainian ambassadors. We played 46 concerts in 2 months. So we had in 10 countries. So we've been touring a lot, dedicating every concert to solidarity with Ukraine. Then I worked in Norway for 6 months with Arctic Philharmonic, and on November I came to Iceland. So of course, in many ways I was lucky because I had a job during all this time, and I didn't went through maybe the biggest difficulties as other Ukrainians. So of course I feel very privileged and very lucky. And this work, being able to work as musician, as violinist, it was the only thing which connects me with my past. I lost everything. I lost almost everything from my previous comfortable life, and being able to play violin, that's the only thing which keeps me connected to myself and to stay sane. And maybe it became a foundation for me to build my new life, after war life. What inspires me? During this year, I met so many amazing people everywhere, and I'm so grateful to meet everyone. I experienced such big amount of kindness, and it brings me, I think it gives me hope and faith in humanity that maybe one day we will not have wars in this world. So I think it helps me to survive kindness of people and playing violin. And my biggest inspiration are Ukrainian people, of course. In such dark times, to find strength, bravery, to be able to cooperate, to be able to resist at occupied territories, it's beyond admiration. And this is what inspires me and gives me strength to get up every day. And of course, Ukrainian women. I'm so proud that in Ukrainian army we have 60,000 women who are serving in Ukrainian armed forces. And this is a big amount. And I'm just, as a woman, I'm so proud. And of course, I'm proud of Ukrainian women who are staying in civilian life, and they're helping as much as they can. And one of these women is my mother, and she has birthday today. So that's of course amazing that what she does in her own place. Maybe that's little things compared to politician actions, but her kindness, her strength, her ability to help others, it's also inspiring me. And during last year, I went through different times. I've been at the bottom, I mean psychologically, but what motivates me? I want to win victory for Ukraine as soon as possible, because every day brings many deaths and suffering. And I don't want it to be any more. And I want justice. All criminals have to pay. All criminals have to be punished, and Russia have to pay reparations for all damage they did in Ukraine.
No one can argue with that. And thank you so much for such an honest answer. In my recent events, and there has been some events in this year, when we talk about Ukraine, there's hardly an event when no one cries. So that's okay if someone cries, I just want to say that. But we move on, and I would like to go to part where we talk about culture, specifically about the functions of culture, of expression, of resistance, of resilience, and giving hope and healing of the souls. And I would like to address my first question to Alena. When we were preparing for this talk, and I had some meetings, online meetings with you from Copenhagen, and you told me very strongly, I think that was the first sentence that you said. You said that an artist, any artist, can change the world to the better. I use this possibility to ask you, how can an artist change the world to the better?
And I try to put all this concept of all my life in short sentences, you know. First of all, when we heard art, different people, they have a view of different objects. So for example, painting or something like that. For me, artist is creator, first of all. Every creator inspired by nature. Nature, yes? Nature, what nature do? Nature create environment for all of us. Environment that we can live in, take food, and anyway survive inside environment. So my aim in my work, in my artistic career, to create environment that can influence human mind using architecture, urbanism, painting, so all this artistic experience that humanity have, and create environment good enough to live in. So that is the main point. And when, so we used to speak about like women is weak, artists need to be saved, but wait a minute, we are not in Middle Ages still. So first of all, we're all humans. So no matter who you are, what kind of human, so you're human, it's one thing. So you're strong enough to live your life and to support others. So, and what we see now, when, as you also mentioned, so when every nation work as one organism, we not divided as men and women, we work together. And about art, let's stop dividing art as something separate from living. So, because when you, for example, see architecture, you have no doubts that it is a piece of art, but you can live in. So it is like part of humanity. It's part of humankind. So we are humans, and creativity is our nature. And we all live in nature, and as nature, we create environment. So that's how intelligent person can act, how can react. And yes, that's how I live. And of course, being a foreigner in a country that is absolutely different, it's hard to start. But nevertheless, a lot of people feel it, a lot of people help, a lot of people cooperate, because sometimes we have no need to speak. If you feel the power, if you feel the beat of nature, you know, like heartbeat of the planet. So you do not need 100 words to cooperate, understand each other. So that's why artists in full understanding, I mean, from architecture to music to science even, because even in math, you have art, because when scientists create something new, he became a creator, first of all. So it is all part of this process of creation. So, yeah, so let's be, first of all, humans. And now I'm very glad as Ukrainian to have possibility to speak from the name of Ukrainians, because we were like somewhere near the Russia, small country, and now we can tell about our history, tell about our contribution in the planet cultural life, because, for example, I explore a lot of Icelandic traditions, and Ukrainian ornaments absolutely similar to Icelandic. Tree of life, for example. Some even words in our language similar. So I think before we have a lot of connections all over the world, and these connections, first of all, were cultural, because what you take from other people, clothes, traditions, songs, so you take culture, and culture, it will be our future and what we will leave for next generations. So we now creating a new fundament for new generations, first of all. And we need to think that this fundament must be firm, must be very useful, must be very, in new style, in new way. So we have previous life. We now understand that evil exists. And this evil is very brutal. But artists, creative people, let's call them, are not helpless. Women are not helpless, because it is a part of our nature. So be together now, on the way of building new planet, new nature, like that.
It's very interesting that you find similarities between Ukrainian culture and Icelandic culture.
Oh, a lot, actually. A lot.
Because for me, it's seemingly quite different. Nordic culture and...
Actually not, because trading in between Vikings and Varyags, and we have a legend that one of the kings of actually capital of Ukraine was from the north. Yeah, so actually, we never thought about Iceland like cultural exchange. But now, when I'm here, as an artist and as a researcher, tapestry and textile is my education. And I start to research, first of all, my education. And I connect with handcrafters here, and I start to speak with them, and I thought, oh my God, actually you use similar, it's not familiar, it's similar. And if you use, for example, flowers, there is not so many flowers in Iceland. But if you use, maybe this is Ukrainian flowers, but we take from you runas, from all the small signs, or we connect our, and even, for example, koma, the same, papir. We also, papir on Ukrainian paper, papir, kartoplur, the same, ogurki. Or I think I can spell wrong a bit, I just learned. But yeah, so many similar things. And I think that trading and cultural exchange was, so it creates basic of all cultures. So art is not something picture on the wall. It is what we do and how we live. And actually I admire Iceland. Why? Because they have, so we have our traditions a bit abandoned because we have very modern life, all this technology. And here in Iceland, still wool, still knitting, still horses, and it's alive. It's very, functional, actually, society with all of these connections with traditional art. It's good how it's supposed to work. So really now, new history creates. It's not dead, it's not abandoned. Traditions is alive here, and they're all very, close to our, again, to our nature, yes, actually. We live inside art.
That's very interesting what you say, and we have here actually a woman who is sort of in between the cultures. Born Ukrainian, came to Iceland as a teenager, having been living in Iceland since. You are sort of in between the two cultures, is that right? Do you consider yourself more Ukrainian or more Icelandic?
Somewhere between.
Somewhere in between. Yeah. So let me maybe continue with what Elena started talking and ask you the question. Which part maybe of Icelandic culture can be instrumental and important for maybe help the current situation and aftermath of the war in Ukraine? Can something be borrowed or used?
Well, Iceland is very focused and very about the language, Icelandic language. Like when my friends like ask me like, so in Iceland, which language do they speak? I was like, Icelandic. Okay, is it like a language? Yeah, it's Icelandic language. Okay, and which like currency there is? Icelandic krona. So it's like this is very important thing. And now in Ukraine, like I was born in Ukraine, but my native is Russian language, which is like when I was saying this to my friends in Iceland, they were like, how come? Like, you're Ukrainian speaking Russian, like how, why? And they couldn't understand like this. And I understand why they don't understand, because in Iceland it's Icelandic. But now, which is good, people in Ukraine and Ukrainian people like abroad, we are using more Ukrainian. So it can, because it's so beautiful language, and this is something that uniting us, and the culture about the songs, Ukrainian songs, and just, it's so beautiful. So I think this is something that we can more and more do and use the language, because like in Iceland, I really admire this about Icelanders, if you speak Icelandic, you more likely get better job. Which is true, and this is normal. This is of course, it's how it should be. Like so, Icelanders, they're more like they lived their spirit and their culture together as one team, and helping each other, and also like Ukrainians. We are like when the war started, we can hear all Ukrainians around the world helping and being there. Not just like, no, it's not my business. Nobody did. Like, I mean, there's people I know, like Ukrainians, like we want to help, even if we are not in Ukraine, and we want to help. And that makes us similar with Icelandic people, like with Icelanders. Like we are there to help.
That's actually true if you think of that. Through all these years, through all the invasions, through all the time, Iceland managed to keep its national identity, its national language, its national character. And if you say anywhere in the world, Iceland, there is immediately click the image, the language, the country. Mm-hmm. It is one of the kind. It's a gem, so to say, of the Nordics. And that is so obvious. And I think this is, you're right, this is what Ukraine needs right now, to stand up and also be the gem of itself, of its own culture, of its own language. Mm-hmm. I think this is so right.
More come with like you're saying, Olena is saying that we are Ukrainians, like we maybe a bit not forgot, but like put it on the side or something. With all innovations, with everything what's happening in the world, we want to be more like close to Europe and more like modern, but we still need to raise and to not forget our roots and our past and our culture and everything what like our traditional customs and all that. Of course, we still do have them, but we need to maybe more. And this is in a way we need to save this our what we have from the past. We need to save it and keep to the years and have it. So Ukraine is a country, and people there are Ukrainians, not Russians, and we need to speak more Ukrainian.
Absolutely. One of the characteristics, so to say, of Iceland is that it's the land of the poets. And we talk about poetry today as well. And I would like to ask you a question, Natasha, about the role of poet in the time of war and in the time of peace. Is that any different? Is there any special role of the poet in the time of war?
I was actually thinking, is there any time where there is no war? Because there is always war somewhere. And if we take Iliad, which is 29th century old piece of poetry, is about the war. And you just wonder, like, what, like I at least wondered a lot for the last year about the role of literature in these dark times, like, and I was very confused because, like, how come we didn't see it coming? How it was always in front of our face? How come people still don't believe, still don't understand? And, like, have they not read it? Everybody has to read War and Peace in school. Everybody have read Crime and Punishment, which is not specifically, but still, like, this is a big and heavy theme in our literature, and still, like, we are here where we are today. So I kind of, like, got a little bit disappointed in this, like, role of literature, but at the same time, I'm thinking maybe the role of literature is not to change, but maybe give comfort, maybe, like, also when, like, as a writer, like, you write because it's something that you need to kind of get rid of. It's something that you maybe try to understand. And it's always kind of, like, easier to understand something when you try to explain it to other people. And this is maybe also part of the writing process. And also, like, working with the trauma, because I think this, like, Russian war in Ukraine is trauma for, like, millions of people. So talking about it is definitely something that we have to do. But the problem is that I don't think that it reaches the audience that it's supposed to reach, and that might be the problem. Like, for example, with Me Too thingy, when people started to talk about it, like, started to speak up, things started to get changed, at least, like, from perspective from here. Maybe it didn't change that much in countries where it didn't reach, where in societies where people were not ready to hear it. And the same thing, like, with literature in Russia, for example, like, we have all the books, all the stories, all the horrors, and people still just, like, repeating it 100 years later. So we definitely should talk about it, should, like, document it, in maybe hope that somebody in the future will read it and maybe take a note to not repeat it. But it doesn't seem like it's working, at least in Russia.
But if we talk about one of the reasons where you mentioned that it doesn't reach the people whom the message is supposed to reach. And then maybe I should ask you a question. Can then literature and poetry help to do something to try to help propaganda, for example?
As I think Halldór Laxness, Icelandic writer, he saw propaganda as a literature genre. And maybe propaganda is literature genre. And maybe literature does have this hypnotic effect on people. And, like, writing just, like, poems, and, like, if we talk about, like, Iliad, for example, which is, like, masculine, and all this, like, war energy is very masculine, as you mentioned in the beginning, while women writing about war is very, like, sensitive and emotional and stuff like that. I don't think men would read it. I don't think men who are, like, just sick of their power would read poetry. So if we could just, like, fix it, if they would show, like, poetry readings on the TV every day, that might have effect. But as we know, this is not the case in, like, totalitarian regime as it is in Russia. So maybe on an underground level, it can, like, be a drop in the ocean, but it is too small and too not mainstream to fight this big propaganda machine.
But every drop matters. So we have to do what we do. Katerina, what role do you think the culture and arts and music in particular, I will ask you about music, play in a time of war?
Arts in general reflects our reality in many ways. For me, as an artist, as performer, music have been the only way to feel myself and to express my feelings. And all other activities I felt numb and frozen, of course, because of shock. So for me, it was a way just to feel myself. And I think a lot of people can relate to me. So art gave me this feeling of being alive. Arts and music, also music can express powerful messages, or just messages when you have no words to express your feelings. So, you know, when language is not perfect, so music can give you more meaning, and music can speak when you have no words. But of course, arts and culture is such an important way to represent, and now we Ukrainians, we have a chance to represent our culture, to show it, to finally show that Ukraine has something to share with the world. And as it was mentioned before, Ukraine been forgotten for a long time, and it was perceived as a part of Russia. But why we had this? Because for centuries we've been occupied by Russia. And I'm sure you don't know Ukrainian writers who you can put on one level with Tolstoy and Dostoevsky. You know why? Because they were killed. Millions of Ukrainian musicians, artists, writers, politicians were killed just because they didn't want to be part of Russian culture. They wanted to be creator of Ukrainian culture. They never had the chance to write their best masterpieces because they just been killed. And now Ukraine been independent for 30 years. And again, history repeating itself. But it's actually, I'm not sure it's repeating itself. Russia never wanted to, to let Ukraine go. And now, again, it's just destroying a lot of talents. And Ukrainian artists, I think we can talk about all art in general, not just music. We have what to show to the world, not just war. We can share our art and be creators. We just need a safe place to create. And we want to share it. And now I'm as performer, and I want to be part of it. I want to share beautiful Ukrainian culture, which can tell you, beautiful Ukrainian music, which can tell you a lot about suffering, about crying, but also about beautiful moments, about our soul. So in this way, I feel that art is a very powerful part of our life. It is a way to express our feelings. It is a way to tell you what we feel. And of course, it is a way to connect with each other.
Can culture and art help Ukraine in the war right now and in the aftermath of the war?
Yes, of course. I feel, when war started, I couldn't listen to music for a long time, and I really love music. But maybe a few months, I was performing, of course, I played concerts, but for me it was like my mission. But then a few months later, I just heard some Ukrainian song, and it unblocked my ability to listen to music again, and I felt connected with Ukrainians. So in this way, we can connect with creators who create that song, or with composer who lived a long time ago, or when I listen to traditional song, I can connect with this past or with the present. So it's traveling through time, through space, and we can heal each other with art. And after war, we have to be ready that we will have, and right now we have millions of traumatized people, and art is part of a therapy, of course. I see this, I see it as it is. So we should not stop. We should go forward and work a lot.
As we said in the beginning, it's healing both in the personal level, on the level of family, on the level of community. on the level of cultural heritage and the level of society. I promised a Q&A session, but we're running out of time, but maybe we can take a couple of questions. If you have any, please raise your hand, and we have a microphone to give to you.
No, it's not a question, rather a comment, and I know that I speak on behalf of all of us. It has been such a moving and experience to listen to you. Very impressive, I must say.
Excuse me,
not being victims, but rather taking control, I must say that made a great impact on me. And so thank you all for sharing these stories. And yeah, let's talk. We have a project. I'm the Swedish ambassador. We have a project that could be of interest to you. Okay. So let's talk.
Yes.
That's all.
And maybe, yes, as one of the moments I want to say that all of us create, a balance. So if in one part is like darkness, we all can be like another light weight in this planet.
That's true.
Yeah. And thank you a lot for being here also, because really it is very important and responsible to be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, if there is no more questions, then I think I can just conclude by saying it's been an interesting and thought-provoking session, I hope. And it wasn't easy, and especially for my guests, for panelists, and how can that be easy if the war is still going on and people are dying still? But what we have learned today is one of the most important things is that culture is not powerless. I want to express my sincere gratitude to panelists for sharing their thoughts with us today. Thank you so much for being here. And please give the warmest applause to the most beautiful and brave women of arts and culture in the time of war. Thank you.
Já, kæra þakkir, thank you very much. Afar áhugavert og áhrifaríkar frásagnir og umræða. Og mér var nú hugsað til þess undir þessum panel að stríðsátök og þær tilfinningar og í rauninni sá veruleiki sem þær voru að lýsa og fjalla Þetta var auðvitað veruleiki Norðurlandana líka fyrir ekki svo mörg 100 árum. Og í rauninni ótrúlegt að hugsa til þess að við séum komin frá þessum stað yfir í þann stað sem við erum í dag. En ég segi kannski meira það síðar. Næst á dagskránni Bryndís Haraldsdóttir, þingkona eða þingmaður, formaður Íslandsdeildar Norðurlandaráðs, hefur verið virk í vestnorrænu samstarfi einnig, þannig að hún þekkir allar hliðar norræns samstarfs, á kannski eftir að verða í ráðherraráðinu síðar, hver veit. En rétt eins og ég þakkaði Guðmundi Inga fyrir hans liðveislu og ríkisstjórnarinnar fyrir baráttuna fyrir auknu norrænu samstarfi, þá vil ég sérstaklega nefna það líka að þingmenn okkar hafa verið sérstaklega ötulir talsmenn þessa sama og hafa verið rauninni staðið sér best allra þingmanna Norðurlandana í því að halda á lofti mikilvægi þess að auka í og bæta norrænt samstarf og stoppa undanhaldið sem að mörgu leyti hefur verið undanfarin ár. Þannig að það bara sérstakur heiður að bjóða þér að ávarpa okkur, Bryndís, gjör svo vel.
Takk fyrir kærlega. Ef ég má byrja á ensku, thank you so much. This was so inspiring. And for us living in this peaceful country here to hear your stories and connecting better to Ukraine, because I have to say that before